Years ago, I read an article in the Star Ledger about an urban farm, Brick City Urban Farms, on Court Street, which is right down the street from St. Benedict's. And it had a picture, and it showed this city block size plot filled with these black containers that were being planted. So I thought, gee, this is really interesting. A vegetable garden, a huge vegetable garden planted blocks away from St. Benedict's. And I thought it would be really cool if we could have a vegetable garden at St. Benedict's. Anyway, I spent a lot of time trying to track down the people who were named in the garden as the proprietors of the garden. And I finally got one of them to answer my phone call. And she said, come on over and see it. So I went over, I met her, looked at the garden, and I said, you know, I'd like to start, I work at St. Benedict's, I'd like to start a garden like this at our school. We have a spring phase project, which would be a good time to plant a garden. And she said, I'll help you. We got a group of kids, we got a little bit of money from the spring phase projects, and Lorraine lent us 35 earth boxes.
Okay, so we have about 100 earth boxes, okay, that these are already prepared. The students prepared them for the past week and a half. And we have 6 raised beds, okay? The earth boxes is a type of a hydroponic system where water is absorbed, okay? Water is stored here. Water is poured through here into the reservoir, right? And the plants absorb the water up. The planting media is not soil. It's a special mix, okay? Because the hydroponic system does not require soil. It requires water and a special media. It's a very light media, as opposed to the raised beds. That has soil, all right? So these 2 are the new raised beds that were built this year.
Each student is assigned a certain crop that they are going to grow. So a pair of students will be responsible for radishes. A pair of students will be responsible for pumpkins. A pair of students will be responsible for collards. Another 2 for kale, and so forth. And then we have groups of students responsible for the certain number of boxes and for different crop. But the tomatoes, since there's so many tomato plants, it's divided up between the student. So they have to know how to prepare the boxes. They have to know how to water, to monitor the growth, check for pests.
Today, we just finished planting pumpkin seeds in this raised bed right here. Right after I finished 10 minutes of watering the soil since it was dry all day in the sun.
Hopefully our seeds will get to this from being planted together.
My experience in the Growing the Garden project has not been what I expected it to be. I expected to be sitting in the sun, bored the whole day, just planting. That wasn't the case. We learned about where food comes from, what we put into our bodies, and we planted and got to learn about what we did. So in the project so far, I've planted tomatoes, I've planted eggplant, I've read up to chapter, I think it should be 6 right now, in our food book. And up to this point, I've learned where my food comes from. I've learned how to deal with nutrition facts. So it's basically a well-rounded class.
Right now we're in the bed, one of the raised beds that has the strawberries that we planted last year. So they've come up again this year. And if you notice, if you come closer, you'll see the flowers. See the flowers? And then if you come over here, you will see that some of the flowers have turned into, what do you call that? A strawberry. All right, so that's going to grow bigger, and then when it turns red, that's when it's ripe, and that's ready for picking.
My experience has been really fun. Well, we started digging up plants. Like when we first came out here, like the second day, like everything you see, covered in weeds. Like, you know, Planet of the Apes, it was Planet of the Weed. Not Snoop Dogg's version, but. So we had to pull that up. Like that whole strawberry patch, like you see right there, it was like, you could not recognize the strawberries. So we had to take out the weeds, then we had to prep the boxes, which took a couple days actually, because it's just like tedious work, but it's what you gotta do if you want some vegetables.
My experience in this project, kind of life-changing, you know. Got to learn to plant some stuff. As you can see, growing up in the city, I don't really get to experience much of this. So it's just kind of different. Like you learn something new, take it on along with you for a lifetime. It's all good.
9 years later, we now have 100 earth boxes. We have 6 raised beds. We have 14 or 15 kids every spring phase to help us clean up the garden, plant it, and get it started. So we have a little system going. It's not perfect. Every year it gets a little bit better. It's a great lesson in perseverance, patience, figuring out what things cost, figuring out what works in any kind of a project. For us, this is not a money-making operation. It's an educational operation.
I am compost. I am compost. I am compost.